Hello again. This is Craig Webb with another economics report on what's happening in lumber and building materials across the country. I want to thank ECI once again for sponsoring this report. The reason I'm showing this barn dominium, which is for sale in Tennessee for $185,000, is that it will emphasize one of the long-range points I want to make in today's presentation, and that is that the housing shortage continues, and the housing shortage will stay with us for a long time. So if you were in the business of supplying construction materials, you're going to have demand for years and years to come. Let's start going through some of the quick things that I see happening this month right now. We're going to talk a little bit about the overall economy and some forecasts, modest forecasts for next year, and how that compares right now with some of the challenges that you may be having. We're also going to look at price increases, as well as that brand new president we have, a return from the old president that we had 4 years ago. And again, we're going to look at the housing shortage. As always, the big message I want to try to bring forward to you is that the economy today is like being on a paddleboard for you in the construction supply industry. You're not getting any momentum from any great movements, any great drops in rates, any great demand from customers. If you're going to get ahead, you're going to have to provide your own propulsion. Now, that economy that we're existing in is simmering. It's not boiling, and it's certainly not freezing like we worried about a while back. The third quarter numbers are in now, and they showed about a 2.8% increase in the gross domestic product from the previous quarter. And according to the Atlanta Fed's GDP Now forecast for where we're going to be this quarter, it's showing about 2.3% growth, which is still ahead of what some of the economists said we were going to be doing. We've had the wage growth outpacing inflation for the last 2 years. Of course, that giant spike that we had a couple of years ago in inflation has influenced so many people's opinions about the state of the economy. But when it comes to actually money coming into people's wallets, it's higher than it used to, and it's been staying higher. And that's sort of showing up in a lot of different numbers. One of them is the National Retail Federation's prediction of how much people will be spending on the holidays, about a $27 increase per person this holiday season. And if you sort of take inflation, that's going to be reflective of most of that increase, but it does indicate that people are not pulling back like maybe some people had feared. Meanwhile, it's intriguing to see that we're seeing an increase in the number of manufacturing facilities being built in the United States right now, 3 times the level that we saw just a few years ago. That should be a good sign if we end up having tariffs on foreign products, because we'll have even more products that are made in the United States. And interestingly, if you take a look at the productivity of the American worker since about the start of 2020, we have increased our output by 12%, and we're only working a little less than 4% more hours. And if you just take the third quarter from the previous quarter, productivity increased 2.2% just in that quarter. So in other words, those are all good signs that the economy is moving along and progressing. And in fact, we should feel good about what we're doing in the United States, because if you compare us to other countries, we're ahead of where they are. I'm intrigued that the Economist reported that the average wages in Mississippi are higher than the average wages in Canada, Britain, and Germany. Those people certainly don't mind coming here, and certainly from a lot of other places. It explains why immigration is what it is. Now, those generally positive numbers may seem a little strange to you when you start looking at what's been happening on the single and multifamily construction front. We've been having a general reduction in number of homes under construction. Starts are up, permits are down on the single family side. On the multifamily side, things are way down. That's largely because the higher interest rates we've had in the past few years had limited investment. And so that's finally starting to show up in those numbers. You're also starting to see the numbers come in from the third quarter for companies like Builders FirstSource. You can see declines in single family, declines in multifamily, a tiny little rise in repair and remodeling. Universal Forest Products, which produces decking and other products, you can see that their sales on an organic basis in terms of units dropped. LP siding sales did increase, but oriented strand board sales dropped. So various results depending on where you are. Boise Cascade, look at all those numbers with parentheses on the right-hand side. Things are worse as of the third quarter of this year than they were the third quarter of the previous year. And finally, with Beacon, Beacon did show some increases in their business, but virtually all of it came from acquisitions and none of it came from organic sales. Looking ahead, we're seeing a general plan by the bigger builders to increase their housing starts. And you can see some of the numbers in terms of total forecasts from places like Fannie Mae and Zonda. And, it's about 1.3, 1.4 million total housing starts in 2025, which is a slight increase from what we've seen in 2024. And if you talk about spending, John Burns Research and Consulting believes that there's going to be growth on the single family side, but we won't see growth on the multifamily side until 2026. The best remodeling forecast tends to come from Harvard University, and that drop in the red line basically takes us through the early parts of 2025 before things start getting better. And a lot of people are believing that the second half of 2025 will be more optimistic than the first half of 2025. Now, one good sign on the remodeling side is that, according to the New York Federal Reserve, more people want to move than we've seen in the past. So there's actually a belief that a lot of people who have moved already didn't like the homes they were in. So that also could be a driver. In fact, we're starting to see some indications that when the numbers for October come in on existing home sales, we could see the first year-over-year increase in existing home sales in the last 3 years. So we could be just sort of breaking out of the old ways. I want to talk a little bit about products and prices for a moment and what you can expect. John Burns, once again, is showing not much of a gain in sales, dollar sales of various products this year. Next year, things are going to get better. So that's one good sign. We know what the hurricanes and the storms did in parts of the South. Longer delivery times can be expected in those areas, and that could affect things. Shortages also are going to be likely in terms of gypsum and roofing and the like. And those things are just contributing to a more general trend we're seeing. Climate change is definitely real if you start looking at various services and how the warmth of the world is growing. And even if you don't necessarily think this is a big issue, this is, in your world, when it comes to the property insurance rates that we've seen since 2019, a 50% increase nationally, but the most devastated storm-ridden parts of the United States in Florida are seeing much, much larger property insurance increases. And I think that in many ways is how the heating up of the planet is going to affect us first in terms of property insurance. We also could see, as a result, some changes in codes. I was intrigued to see that a roofing and sheet metal association in Florida had noted that it would be good if you could have more roof-to-wall connections to help protect homes and keep them from losing their roofs during hurricanes. But when you're rebuilding a home in Florida, roofers are not allowed to make those kinds of connections from the roof to the wall panels. And so therefore, you could see some efforts in the Florida legislature and other places to make this possible. Now, I haven't talked about the election yet, but it's time to get into that. The National Association of Home Builders probably was writing the same message no matter who won, and that was to let builders build. Certainly, there's a lot of beliefs that There's going to be a more relaxed regulatory environment under President Trump. And I think that we are going to have some big uncertainties when it comes to the housing market. One is, if we deport illegal migrants, is that going to empty the labor supply, not just in housing, but also in processing plants and factories across the country? Can Trump really do all that much to reduce mortgage rates? He wants to put in more federal land and make that available, but do people want to live in those places where the federal government owns land? Energy efficiency initiatives will be challenged. And we're going to see some interesting choices being made by people when you consider that most of the fasteners in the United States, as well as most of the white goods that go into homes, are imported. And those prices may be affected. And the biggest issue, I think, in terms of Trump's impact on the housing market is that, frankly, almost all housing regulations and rules are local. So, what can a US president really do to affect the vast bulk of housing that comes up in the United States? Well, we're going to find out. Just today, and I'm recording this on Thursday, we had another rate cut of a quarter point. Is that one of the questions that's coming up now is, will concern about the federal deficit and the economy cause the Fed to slow future reductions? There had been another 1/4 rate cut that was widely expected to come up in December. We'll see if that one goes through and then how things go in 2025. Right now, unusually, the fixed year rate had gone up since the half-point increase, half-point reduction in rates that the Fed put in a while back. We're up to 7%, which is basically so high that most people believe that it's not going to do much to stimulate housing. Now, in terms of what housing needs versus where it is right now, some researchers at Harvard came up with some pretty interesting numbers about where they think the population and the housing needs are going to go for the next 20 years. They have forecast that between 2025 and 2035, we're going to need to build about 1.4 million homes of all types per year. Now, keep in mind, remember, the prediction for housing starts this year by most of those people was a little bit over 1.3 million. And so, in other words, we need to rise to the level that we're thinking we're going to get to in 2025 and then keep at that level for the next 10 years. And the wild thing about it is that even if we do, that doesn't take care of any of the shortage that we've had to date. That just, sort of keeps us up to meet current needs. So, in other words, we're going to be having housing shortages over the next 20 years and beyond. And that's going to be basically a sign that your business is going to be good. Now, could we build any better or any faster? Well, regulations really are a huge factor in whether that's going to happen. The National Association of Home Builders did a study back in 2021 and found that they were about 24% of a home cost. It's probably gone up when you consider impact fees and property taxes and the like that also figure in. And those, once again, are local decisions made by local officials. It's not as if the president from the White House can issue an order saying we're going to get rid of these regulations. So where we go forward is going to depend, I think, more on local initiatives than it will on federal initiatives. In sum, you're facing a lot of headwinds. And as I said, that's going to make challenges for you going forward. We've been through a really tough year. I think we all need a drink. And so I was fascinated when I saw that Woods Ace Hardware in Somerville, South Carolina, has actually opened a bar in its hardware store. Maybe we all need to do that. I know some places in Australia where you can get a good cup of cappuccino while you're shopping for building materials. Now, I haven't talked so far about what is probably the biggest long-going story that's been taking place right now, which is True Value's Chapter 11 bankruptcy and its desire to be bought by Do It Best. The best place to keep up with that is to go to my website, webb-analytics.com. There's a page that you can go to where I am keeping regular tabs on what's happening with constant updates. And I hope that you will go to there to figure out what's going on. The idea, though, is that if it works, True Value will continue as a brand. It will be rescued from extinction, just as we're also rescuing from extinction the black-footed ferret. Wonderful things can happen when people put their mind to them. So that is it. That is me. I hope that this did you some good. Once again, I want to thank ECI for being the sponsor of this report, and I hope to be able to talk with you again in the near future. Bye-bye.